Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 3 of Inside of the Red Box. I'm Daniel Barratt, a chartered financial planner here at Brooks Financial, and today I'm joined by investment director at Brooks Macdonald, James. Hi, James.
Hello, Dan. Great to be here. Thank you for having me on.
No problem. In this series, we've been discussing about the speculation around the upcoming budget. And in today's video, we're going to have another conversation with James, but we're going to really try and focus around pensions today. So, James, there was a budget 2025 November, and we saw some big changes to pensions. Do you want to give a brief outline of what we saw there?
Yeah, I think I sort of in the main last year, the death benefits from defined contribution pensions being included in the deceased estate for inheritance tax purposes really marked a significant shift and very much turned the world of pensions as we know them, certainly in the sort of short term, on their head. And I know the IHT change triggered a surge in pension withdrawals. So there's obviously been lots of speculation in for the upcoming budget around other changes to pensions. If I may, I'll sort of pass over to you just to sort of explain what they are, and then I'm happy to sort of comment on where we're seeing things.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think after last year, you would hope they'd leave pensions alone, but there's been lots of speculation, especially around the tax-free cash lump sum. So, as most people are aware, you can access 25% of your pension as a lump sum, tax-free, when you access the pension. There's talks around reducing that limit or completely eliminating that allowance. Now, I've had a conversation with Sir Steve Webb on another podcast, who was an ex-pensions minister, and I think he put the chances of this happening to very, very minute. So we've seen people make good reactions to speculation. Have you had any conversations with clients around this and sort of saying, I need my tax-free cash because they're going to take it away? What have been conversations you've been having?
Yeah, well, I think that there's obviously, as you rightly point out, there's been a lot of noise around tax-free cash, and we sort of know from last year that making a knee-jerk reaction to speculation is not the right thing to do. And I think what's interesting again is how this speculation alone has driven investor behaviour, similar to that we saw ahead of last year's budget. And ultimately, people end up making irreversible decisions based on rumours. And I think after sort of last year, HMRC confirmed there's no cooling off period for these things. So as you rightly point out, I think there's been a lot of press speculation, but a lot of the industry experts and commentators have said that it would be a deeply unpopular thing to do. It wouldn't necessarily raise much revenue in the short term. And as you say, experts argue it's unlikely, but the lack of clarity really fuels anxiety. Now, we have seen clients take their tax-free cash, and that may well be right for them. But I certainly think now more than ever, it has brought to the fore that people really need to consult with financial advisors, take that independent advice and see if they are thinking about taking their tax-free cash, whether that's actually right for them.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, like you say, it's with any financial decision, it's always about your individual circumstances. And I say this to my clients quite often, like you can lose sleep over what potential tax changes. And if you believed everything that you saw and read and tried to react to that, you'd end up tying yourself in absolute knots. And actually, bigger impacts on individuals is what happens in their life, that something could happen to their family or their partner, and that has a much wider impact than tax changes. But often people just don't think about those sorts of things. So I think it's like you say, take advice, understand what you should do, because I've advised clients to take the tax-free cash because they were going to spend it quite soon anyway, and I've advised many more of them not to bother. And especially last year, and because of the amount of growth we've seen in portfolios, that's turned out that they've got a much bigger tax-free lump sum by not doing that. So it's really important that you just understand how it affects your sort of your position. One of the IHT and pensions being brought into that regime. We've seen the draft legislation. I think it's up to its second reading now. It's not quite come in. It's April 2027 that the pensions will become liable to inheritance tax. I've certainly been talking to clients about annuities and that as an option of sort of remove like cashing in your pension to get an annual income, so therefore there's nothing to tax when you die. But have you got similar sort of stories with clients or anything solution wise that you can think of there?
Yes, I think the external and internal advisors that we've been speaking to, annuities have very much been back on the table, and I think again it's is this right for your circumstances, and that's where it's so important to get that financial advice from a qualified professional. There's still a huge amount of the UK population that aren't receiving financial advice. I think there was a report by Advice Gap, the Advice Gap report by the Lancat and Borrowed Money that said only 9% of UK adults currently receive paid for financial advice, which is about 5 million people based on the UK adult population of around sort of 55, 56 million. So annuities are very much are an option for people. In terms of the strategies that we have here at Brooks, they can be used in conjunction with the likes of annuities. They can be used as a standalone solution. But we do have a very specific retirement solution tailored to people's needs. Brooks was one of the first discretionary investment managers to launch a dedicated and defined approach to managing client assets in the what we call the decumulation phase of life. And I can quickly touch, if you like, Dan, just on how that works.
Yeah, I think it's really, really powerful because it's something that I was quite new to recently, and I've started to use with a lot of my clients as almost like an alternative to annuities as well. So if you could just explain how it works and what it is.
Yeah, absolutely. So the approach is built on two distinct components, really that recognise the need to cover off sequencing risk. So for anyone unfamiliar with sequencing risk, in retirement, it's the impact of taking withdrawals during market downturns, which ultimately negatively impact the value of your retirement pot. So how we approach it is effectively to split the portfolio into two, not quite an even split, typically not an even split, but there's a short-term portfolio which uses cash and fixed maturity investments, such as structured products and gilts, to meet the first 7 years of the client's income requirements. That leaves a second long-term pot to generate capital growth that ultimately can then be turned into income in later years. So the short-term pot is replenished by the long-term pot, if you like. And our approach is differentiated in the fact it's about the management of time rather than managing volatility risk, very much focusing on securing your client's income early in their retirement to really mitigate the impact of sequencing risk.
Yeah, and I think the key thing, as I was talking about earlier, of your individual circumstances are going to have a much bigger impact than any sort of tax changes or rule changes. So actually taking advice, finding somebody who can manage the money in a way that meets what you want to do with your money is really powerful. Well, thank you for joining me today, James.
Thank you for having me, Dan.
And thank you all for watching today on Inside the Red Box.